Hello everyone, Strategic Sage back with more Factorio Demystified, diving into the sometimes confusing and wacky topic of nuclear power. We're going to cover that from start to finish, mining to getting all of our power situated, and by the end of this session, we are no longer going to have any concerns about where our power is coming from for the rest of the factory. That's how powerful nuclear power can be. So we want to refine the uranium up in this north end, right at the end of our current bus. But the ore is actually coming from down here. It's the only uranium ore spot that we're aware of yet. Of course, there could be more if we explore out further. We would eventually find it, but we don't really need to do that. This is going to be more than what we're going to need, and we'll have extra besides. So if we look at what's going on here, the lovely bright green ore on the right, mining time 200%, so it takes twice as long to mine it. We also need, as you can see, 1 sulfuric acid per mining operation. If we put down our mines themselves, they look normal over here. Once you put them on top of the uranium, they appear to have grown these extra connectors on the sides. And the reason for that is so we can bring in the sulfuric acid. So for example, if we were just to put a few of them down, and then connect them up with pipes, or we could use the ones back here or on the other side, any of the directions that aren't where the actual output of the ore is going to be are allowed. And then, of course, we would need to connect this up to our pipeline right there. And I have this connected all the way back up to our bus. We could use trains to bring in the sulfuric acid and to bring the ore back. I decided it really wasn't quite far enough to do that, and the hassle of setting all that up, just easier to throw in the pipes. We have quite a few of them stringing along here. And then we just need to fill this out. Here's our mining operation fully underway. Of course, we need to string our transport belt all the way back. As it happens, we have 31 miners here. Let's keep that number in mind for later when we notice how much uranium we are actually going to need. We've got all of the sulfur pipes connecting, so I can't walk in between as much as I would necessarily like to, but I'm using undergrounds to cross over, and for the most part, it just looks like a normal mining operation plus the pipes. Nuclear power, as implemented in Factorio, is quite strongly based on real-world nuclear fission. We've now moved on from the mining stage to the processing or refining stage, hence we are at centrifuge row. These are all moderately expensive to build, and they are all doing a rather unique process here. Uranium processing, 10 uranium ore in, but it can produce one of two products. It's not predetermined, so that's a little bit different. We have 0.7%, very rare chance of getting uranium-235, also sometimes called the light or good uranium because of how rare it is. And then 99.3% chance of the uranium-238, dark or bad uranium. Although it's not really bad, we need both of them to produce the uranium fuel cells to power our nuclear reactors, but we need a proportion that's not so heavily weighted towards the uranium-238. So by nature, we're going to end up being short on the uranium-235 and heavy on the uranium-238, and we need to deal with that. So that's one reason why I have these productivity modules in here to increase our yield, and I'm basically just going to take the hit for the extra energy and pollution that's going to come from that, but it's not a huge amount of pollution. And it's also something that's really intimidated a lot of people into saying, you know what, let's wait till we get more advanced technology and we're better at handling this uranium thing before we do nuclear power, but because, oh my goodness, it's going to take a whole ton of, well, no, it doesn't take that much. Take the example of a single nuclear reactor. Now, that's a very inefficient way to set it up, and we're going to get to that in a bit. But that can produce 40 megawatts of power, which is enough to power our entire factory right now, plus a little bit of surplus. And to get enough for just that, one uranium-235, just one, can produce enough uranium fuel cells to run that reactor for over half an hour. So to power that one reactor, we need less than 0.9 centrifuges, so a significant amount under one, and we need less than 3 miners. And that's with no productivity modules involved. At them, just the tier 1 that we're using now, no further enhancements in our uranium technology. We need just over 2 miners, and again, we got 31 of them coming. And then these 8 centrifuges can produce enough because we're now down to just over 0.8 centrifuges needed per reactor. So we can power almost 10 reactors with the setup that we have now, and that's way more than we would ever need. So this is actually an overkill setup, and it's really not that big. So you can dive into nuclear power absolutely right away and not worry about it as soon as you unlock it. So this setup over here, we've got filter inserters. It's all coming out into chests, filter inserters sorting them. So on the bottom here we have the uranium-238. Every once in a while we get one of the lighter uranium-235s, and they're going on the top side. And then this is set up for future reference. One centrifuge running what is known as the Kovarex process is going to be more than enough because of how it works. And Kovarex process, named after one of the developers, it's basically a self-insert. It's a late-game technology, but we do want to be aware of it and be set up for it. So I have the U-235 coming up here and the far more common 238 coming down here. And the idea is, okay, this is just getting transferred over here, and we're making sure that we have enough to run this process. But we only need 5. And so you can see this is full. This is not going to be a problem. We do need 40 of the U-235, and that's the whole point of getting this set up. It's at 39 right now. I'm telling this not to take any out unless it's at 45 or more. So we're keeping enough stored in here. What'll happen is this loads in, and then it unloads here because we got the filter inserters there, making sure 238 comes here, 235 comes here, and then it comes back over here. And so we're only moving these further on to be used in our fuel cells once we're sure this is satisfied enough. And you can do this with bots as well. There are a number of designs there. I'm going to use some bots a little bit later on in the nuclear process, but I'm just trying to use a basic setup here that can really be effective with the technology you have at the time you develop nuclear power. So then, our uranium fuel cells here, quite simple. We've got iron, we've got 1 of the 235 and 19 of the 238. So still a lot more of that is required, but not nearly the same ratio that we're getting out of our uranium processing. And then this is just emptied out here once we get some over here to produce, and it'll head along this belt over to where we're going to want to build our nuclear reactors. There is a fairly significant startup cost in terms of producing the components for nuclear power, particularly in the areas of concrete, copper, and especially steel. So I ramped up our steel production, tripled our previous amount from 8 to 24 steel furnaces, and then, well, we needed more power to make that happen, so we added some solar over here. And then we needed more iron for the steel, so we mined some new areas, expanded all of that. More than we needed. Better to have more than not enough, but just worth noting there was a little bit of buildup required there, not too bad, but it is a consideration. And then for our power plant itself, we are right over here near the water, because water is going to be required for this, so we've jogged our fuel cell transport belt over in this direction. Getting to know the components of our first basic power plant then, we have the nuclear reactor, which, it will probably be no surprise, is the largest and most expensive item. Looks kind of strange, perhaps a bit futuristic. We will load in fuel cells here, but before we do that, notice on the right, constant consumption of 40 megawatts. This is the opposite of how steam worked, if you recall. Steam would work however fast the system was demanding, and if there was no demand, steam would shut down, and then it would start again when the demand came back. Nuclear reactors work just as hard and burn just as much fuel whether there's any demand or not, so we want to keep that in mind. And then they generate heat, 15 degrees Celsius down below. It needs to be 500 or higher to get any usable power coming out. Output of 40 megawatts, the neighbor bonus we will get to, but that really increases our efficiency. Let's just get to know how one reactor works first. And so we load in our fuel. We can see the temperature gradually rising, and we're burning through the fuel here. And notice it says spent result is used up uranium fuel cell, and that will clog up the reactor and make it stop working if we don't do something with it. So we must do something with our nuclear waste. Sad but true reality. Right now we're just going to store it in a chest. We'll find better ways later on. Then after we get our fuel cells into the reactor, we've got our heat. Then we're going to take heat pipes to conduct it away. And the longer your heat pipe is, the lower the temperature will get. There's a little bit of loss of transmission, but it's very small, so it's not something you have to worry very much about. And then once this gets heated up to that 500 degree mark, that's when you start being able to have some magic happening. Then the heat, we'll use the heat exchanger. And we're going to take water, heat, create steam. Much like the boiler, only we're using heat from the reactor instead of coal. And then we'll have pipes to carry away the steam. And then at some point along here, we are going to add in steam turbines, and that's where actual power comes from. So reactor, heat pipes, heat exchanger, steam turbine. That's your basic chain after you bring in the fuel cells at the beginning of the process. One key item to notice here is that as we scale these reactors and these power plants up, it doesn't work exactly proportionally, because our heat exchangers and our steam turbines work proportional to power, not to number of reactors. So it's not like building another column of furnaces or another block of assemblers to produce more knickknacks, whatever they are. We want to work proportionally to the power, which is going to be more and more efficient. We're going to get more power per reactor as we expand. So you got to do that math right and not just say, well, one reactor took this many, so 2 reactors take twice as much. No, that's not how this works. So if we want to be serious about making a good setup here, we're going to do some math. Specifically, the steam turbines, they can output 5.82 megawatts. That means 7 of them for this 40 megawatt reactor can be used. Almost 7. Just short of fully satisfying 7. And they need 60 steam, as you can see. Then the heat exchanger, you've got the water consumption there first of all. So if we were to divide that out, each offshore pump at 1200 a second could produce enough for between 11 and 12 of these heat exchangers. So that's worth keeping in mind. But then also the maximum consumption there is 10 megawatts. So 40 megawatt reactor, we are going to want 4 heat exchangers. So we might do something like this. We want to hook up 4 of these, and maybe we want them right next to here, and maybe we want to leave a little bit of space. We can do it either way. Make sure you hook them up in the right direction. I'm really good at placing the steam outlet facing the heat exchangers, the heat pipes, rather. That doesn't work very well. So then we're going to have steam coming out here, and steam coming out here. And then I like to just bring in the water right over this way, and then we would hook this up. Let's run this out here, get this going while we're at it. There we go. And then let's see. All right, here's a good spot for an offshore pump. That went a little bit too far. Hook up our pipes. Okay, so now we have water coming into the system. And of course, tons of room to expand here if we needed it. And then maybe we want to run our pipes along here more. We could do some undergrounds there, or I could cross over with some undergrounds here. I mean, I could do any number of things. You can have heat pipes coming out of all corners of this and set up things in different directions. I can set up my turbines over here, up this way. There's a lot of flexibility with how you want to do this. We only need to hook up 7 of these, though. So I'll just do something like this. And then we'll just run this down a little bit further. Then over here we'll want 3 more. And of course, just like our steam engines that we saw before, these are just flashing at us because there's nothing going on here. We need to get them hooked up to power. And now they're not doing anything because they're not needed. So let's talk a little bit about power priority here. You can just work this around however you want. But solar is still going to take priority over nuclear, but nuclear will step in before you get to the accumulators. So that's how all of that is going to work out for us. And we'll just skip ahead to nighttime so we can see this actually doing something. And here we go. Just starting to turn on here. If we notice, solar going down, steam turbines going up, and you'll see more and more steam coming out. Notice this right here, almost up to maximum temperature. It can get up to 1,000. We've got a couple of our spent fuel cells there. Everything working great. You can see the heat along the heat pipe. So functional nuclear power plant, but only one reactor. We're probably going to want to go a little bigger than that. If we want multiple reactors to work together for more efficiency, they have to be set up in a specific way. So put one down here like we had before. Another one to hook up to this needs to be directly adjacent to it, face to face. It can't be offset. Like, for example, you might want to say, hey, look, I've got two of them together on that side. That doesn't work. Neither one of them will get the neighbor bonus, which is an additional 40 megawatts. So this is one 40 megawatt reactor. This is not two 40 megawatt reactors, it's two 80 megawatt reactors. If I put one over here, this one is 120, getting the two neighbors, and these two are 80. So this can really add up fast. Now, the largest theoretical limit you could do then would obviously be to have one reactor connected on all four sides, and you'd get 200 megawatts out of this. Practically speaking, though, that's not going to work, because how are you going to load and unload the fuel? You're really not. You're going to have to do it by hand, and nobody's going to want to mess with that. And there's no reason to, given how much power you can get out of these. So if we just remove the one, though, we've got room to load and unload here. You're still getting 3 bonuses, so this reactor is going to get 160 megawatts. So that's basically your more practical limit, although you can never quite get there. But you can get really, really, really close to it if you build a large enough block of reactors, that 160 megawatts level. Let's just try the two 80 megawatt reactors just to see how that might work. So that would be basically 50% of our practical efficiency limit, as opposed to the 25% we got before, which was just 40 megawatts a reactor. And you notice there it says the neighbor bonus plus 100%, and we're getting 80 megawatts from each of these. So how do we figure then, using the concepts we talked about before, how much we need for this? How many pumps? How many heat exchangers? How many steam turbines? Well, the heat exchangers, one for every 10 megawatts, we're going to get a total of 160 megawatts out of this, so we need 16 heat exchangers. And then one heat exchanger, or one pump rather, can supply 11 to 12 heat exchangers, so we're actually going to need 2 pumps to supply the 16. Now, when hooking up the heat pipes, you can go in any direction, and you don't have to directly hook up to all the reactors, because the reactors are sharing their heat back and forth between these heat pipes, so we can just throw this connection anywhere we want that's hooked up to either of the reactors. We'll just call it here for now. We'll drag this out, and I like to have one stack, if you will, of heat exchangers per pump. It just keeps things a little simpler in the setup, in my opinion. So let's say we were just going to pull this out this way, and this out this way. And let's see. All up to you whether you want to leave a little bit of space, which I prefer to do, or make things more compact. But let's just move you here. And then, okay, 4 up. That's half, that's 8. And then we could do this. Another 8 over here. Would give us our 16. I think nuclear reactor plants are really a good example of how it's great to use blueprints sometimes, because then you can just fiddle with it, find something you like, and then just be able to stamp down more of them as you may wish. So, steam output. And of course, we'd have our water coming in through this area. And then we'd probably extend these out a ways on both sides. But we'll just do this one for demonstration. And then we need 28 of our steam turbines. And we come up with that with the same math. 160 megawatts, 5.82 megawatts per steam turbine. You know, divide it out, you're going to come up with 28. So then maybe we want 14 on a side. We can do something like this. Now you can stack them up as far as you want, however far out you want to go on the row. Let's just say we went 3. Then every other row, you need a gap for power poles. Then maybe I want additional space in here for additional walking through, and maybe I do underground pipes there, maybe I don't. All depends on how you want to design it. And of course I could put these turbines out here. You can do anything you want, but we just have to hook up power poles, duplicate this on this side, hook up our water, and we've got an operational 160 megawatt power plant that's, again, really not taking up that much space. I mean, this right here, we can just look at the footprint. So it would be over to there, over to that area. That's 160 megawatts. And we're getting a little over 40 from all of this solar. So just keep that in perspective, how much compressed power we're getting here. Let's say we want to scale up to a square of 4 nuclear reactors. And this is actually the setup that I'm going to recommend we use. Now these are going to be 120 megawatts each, so we're at 75% of our efficiency, and we're going to get 480 megawatts out of this. That's going to be enough for the rest of our factory, the rest of the game. But if we decide it wasn't, we could just build another one of these, of course. But it's going to work a little bit differently, because if we're in a square, how's everybody going to get our fuel? So I'm going to do another trick here. And again, this is not my design. It's something that a lot of players have done, but I think it really works well and is a pretty elegant way of going about it. So if we just run this all the way around, and the idea is this is just going to keep cycling about, and we're just going to put our fuel on it. So then all of our reactors will just grab as they need and unload as they need. And with the unloading, because these inserters are facing outwards and this one is facing, like, it's always going to have the fresh fuel cells on the inside and the used fuel cells on the outside. And just keeps going round and round in a circle. And then, of course, at some point, you're still going to want to store the ones that are used, because you could still eventually clog up this belt after enough time. So, particularly if you're concerned about that, we just filter inserter, and we'll find our wonderful used up uranium fuel cell, and they will all get put into here, and then we don't have a problem with that anymore. Now, we still have to connect up our heat pipes. So let's create a little bit of an underground there. Inserter's still working, and we've got a spot with which to do this. And then, of course, the numbers are going to get much bigger here. 480 megawatts. That's going to be 48 then, heat exchangers. That means a little over 4, so we're going to want 5 pumps. So I'm probably going to have 5 stacks, if you will, for 5. And then each of those probably going to have 9 to 10 heat exchangers. And then if you just multiply that out further, we're going to need a lot more in terms of the steam turbines. So we'll come back to a full design of how that would actually work in just a little bit. But I want to get into the next step up that we might take if we want to go even bigger. Here is a 6 reactor setup, and notice I can walk in between there if I wish. But we've got 160 megawatts. We've actually reached that for these 2 in the middle. The ones on the end are 120. And so combined, this is going to give us 800 megawatts. We're at about 83% efficiency compared to 75. And you can notice that we're getting diminishing returns. But this really is the total upper limit on what I think is actually practical. But you can keep right on going out as far as you want. You can just keep pushing out. Like, say we wanted to go to 10. We'd add 2 more on each end. And then those would all be 120. But all of these in here would be 160. And we'd be a little bit bigger. We'd be up at around 90% efficiency at that point. But you can never quite get to 160 megawatts because in this optimal configuration, 2 by however many, the pair on each end are always going to be at 120, and then all the other ones are going to be at 160. And so you can get well over 150, but you're never actually going to get up to fully 160 megawatts per reactor. But we just don't need this much power. It would be so much overkill that we're just going to resort back and really focus in on that 4-reactor setup. Here we are fully operational. We are done worrying about power for the rest of this factory's lifespan. Over here are 4x4 reactors, all working great, all maxed out, or very close to it at 1,000 degrees, storing the used fuel cells. This is gradually filling up and should be there soon. And then our heat pipes, of course, glowing a bit, all nice and hot, and even out here at the end, because they have to stay at least 500 degrees. I mean, 971. That whole distance, it's losing like 20-some degrees. I mean, it's still doing incredibly well. People have built on one single setup as many as 100, maybe more, nuclear reactors, and it works. So, again, you don't have to worry about being super efficient with it. I have all of these connected up. It's easy to just forget about, like, have 2 stacks of heat exchangers on the edges and then not connect all your steam, and a whole bunch of steam here not being used. But we've made various connections wherever we felt like it. 83 steam turbines, and a few more on this side than over here. But again, we could have set that up however we felt like it. So let's take a look at how taxing this has not been on our overall resources. First of all, the uranium started at 2.6 million. It's at 2.5 million. We still have, I think, all of our, or at least, okay, we've used up one of the very edge ones. But the point is, we can keep on doing this for a very long time. And also, we're not using anywhere near all of the uranium in terms of our processing area. This is a full chest, over 3,000. We'll eventually be able to convert that gradually with our Clover X into the U-235. This is half full. This is half full. This belt is backed up. I mean, for any reasonable time frame and well beyond that, we are set. So moving on then, we're going to be looking at processing units, we're going to be looking at mass production, and gradually moving towards the end of the mid-game, because we don't have a lot of mid-game research left, and won't be too long until we break into endgame science. Hope you continue with this series. More Factorio coming your way soon.